How long does it actually take to lose 10 to 15% of body fat? I'll always give you the same answer, the honest one. Not the one you want to hear, but the one that will actually get you there. Because the math is simple. And I can give you that number in about 60 seconds. But here's the thing. The math has nothing to do with why most guys fail this. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it takes longer than you think, but what actually gets in the way. But more importantly, how to push through it when it does. I want you to think about something before we get into the numbers. Most guys I coach, men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even their 60s, they've got busy lives. They don't have an information problem. They know what to do. They've read the articles, they've watched the videos just like this. The problem isn't knowledge. The problem is at some point in the process, the plan they watched on the internet just doesn't apply to their lives. It's built for some guy with no job and an infinite amount of time available, but this is not reality. So let's build this into your life so it becomes sustainable and maintainable long term. Okay, let's do the numbers first. If you're sitting at 20% body fat or even above and you want fully visible abs, we're probably talking between 12 and 15% body fat to lose. That's a target that you can aim for. So the way you calculate how far you need to go is pretty simple. You take your current weight, multiply it by the body fat percentage, and that gives you your fat mass. Subtract that from your total weight, and that's your lean mass. And then you divide your lean mass by 0.88, and that's your goal weight, around 12%. So if you use a real-world example, I'll use Craig as an example, one of my clients. He's in his 40s, runs his own business, kids, works long hours. And when he came to me, he was over 200 pounds at 5'11", and we estimated him around 24 to 28% body fat. He'd been carrying the same belly, the same physique since his mid-30s. He'd tried what he felt like everything, keto, intermittent fasting, PTs. And yeah, he'd lose 8 or 10 pounds, feel good. And then life would get in the way, something would derail him, and he'd be right back where he started. Does that cycle sound familiar? Well, here's how to fix it. But when we ran the numbers with him, his lean mass was about 155 pounds, give or take. The goal weight at 12% is 177 pounds. So he needed to lose upwards of 28 pounds to get into the shape that he wanted. And if you put that at £1 a week, which is a pretty solid rate of loss to minimize muscle loss and all that kind of stuff, it's about 28 weeks. Or about 7 months. Math, done. Clean, simple, logical. Craig looked at that number and said, I can do that. And he was right, but not in the way he expected. So, let me get into the phases that we went through to get to this level of body fat. And please, I urge you to listen to every single one of these phases because each one is as important as the last, and you need to go through the first one to get to the second and the third. And they're very, very important as you go through. So, let's get into phase 1. This is going from anywhere above 25% to about 20% body fat. This is one of the easiest phases. I don't say that to undersell it, but I say that because you need to know it gets harder. And you need to build the habits right now while the progress is still coming fast. For Craig, it was simple. We set him up with the fundamentals, 2,200 calories-ish, got his protein in line with his body weight, 180 grams, 8,000 steps a day, 3 to 4 sessions of training per week. Nothing complicated, compound movements, progressive overload, the basics that built muscle on a fundamental level. In the first 4 to 6 weeks, I felt like a different man. Lose 6 to 8 pounds quickly, clothes looser, face sharper. Even his partner started to notice. Even his energy was up when he started to wake up. He would text me saying he feels like he's finally got it clicking. And this is where I always have to manage the expectations as a coach, because what Craig experienced in those first few weeks, some of that was real fat loss, but actually some of it was glycogen and water, less food in the digestive tract, because your body does drop a lot of water in the early stages of calorie deficit, especially when you're just starting to clean up your diet, reduce your carbohydrates slightly. That early momentum is real, but it's not all fat. Then around week 7 or 8, it begins to slow, and the scale stops moving in the way that it did at the beginning, and Craig, by that point, was hitting about 196, 195 pounds during the week, and then maybe on Monday or the weekend, you'd wake up at 198 or 199. I used to get messages, maybe a little bit frustrated, like, I don't understand what I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing everything right. And here's what I told him, because it happens to so many guys that I coach. Monday to Friday, really good. Really good. The problem was the weekends. And it's not huge blowouts. It's just a lack of tracking. Maybe a few drinks here, Sunday roast on the weekend without logging it, meals where you're kind of estimating it instead of knowing, and that's not necessarily a discipline failure, it's just a system failure. The environment wasn't set up to support the goal at weekends the same way it was Monday to Friday. So we fixed that. We started to plan those weekend meals so that you could still have flexibility and feel like you're not super restricted, but we knew what was happening. And you tracked those things, including the snacks. And one thing that really helped was morning walks before the day took over. And then finally by week 11, Craig was about 192 pounds, right around 20% body fat. That was phase 1 done. And it took about 11 to 12 weeks. Roughly speaking, that could change depending on the person, how well you respond, and if other things set you back as well. That took us into phase 2, this 20% and below, maybe to about 15 or 16%. This is where it gets a little bit more real. Phase 2 is where most guys start to crack, not because the plan stops working, but because progress slows down and patience runs out. You had the initial fat loss, it was quick, motivation cruises, and then just genuinely got a bit more difficult to stick to. And the results came a little bit slower. You couple those two things and it's a recipe for doubting yourself and doubting the progress a little bit. But Craig was losing weight at this point, and you will too, but now it's half a pound a week instead of a pound on a good week. Some weeks maybe the scale doesn't move. And he started doing what every person would do at this point. You would start to panic. You'd start to question things. Is my metabolism broken? Do I need to add more cardio? Should I try fasting? And then he had a work dinner, client event, few glasses of wine, steak, dessert. You stepped on the scale the next morning and you're up 4 pounds. Now, before I move on, it's important to know that this isn't 4 pounds of fat, and before anyone begins to self-destruct, because this is where most people do self-destruct, this is not 4 pounds of fat. You cannot gain 4 pounds of body fat overnight. It's not biologically impossible, physiologically impossible. What you're seeing is glycogen refueling, water retention from the alcohol and the extra carbohydrates, and the physical actual weight of food in your system. It's real weight on the scale, but it's not real fat gain. And it will come back off with 48 hours to 72 hours if you stay on plan. But Craig didn't know that. And this is what most guys do. You panic. You slash your calories. You go from 2,200 all the way down to 1,600 in one move. And for 4 days it worked. Scale moved fast. You felt back in control. And then on day 5, you eat everything in your kitchen. I'm not even exaggerating, this happens. 3,000 calories over your target in one night, then you have a big breakfast the next morning, and before you know it, it feels like you don't even feel like yourself. And it feels like your body just takes over and your brain just isn't in the room. That's a real phenomena, and the science behind it is really, really clear. When you drop your calories too aggressively, ghrelin, your hunger hormone, it spikes, and it spikes hard. At the same time, leptin, this is the hormone that signals satiety and that supports your metabolism, it drops. It's a two-pronged attack on overeating right there. Your body reads a severe deficit as a threat, and it triggers a biological drive to eat. It's not weak willpower, it's a physiology. Your body is trying to survive. And the fix isn't more discipline, the fix is just smarter calorie drops. So, we brought Craig back to 2,000 calories, bumped his steps up a little bit, smaller deficit, more movement, more sustainable. And then you lost 2 weeks to the restriction binge cycle that happens very, very often. But from that point forward, the progress was clean. Phase 2 for Craig lasted about 14 weeks. And by the end of that, Craig was 183 pounds, 182 pounds, which is around 16% body fat at the time. The moral of the story is here, controlled deficits, fueling yourself appropriately will lead to better, more sustainable results long-term while keeping those hunger hormones in check. Phase 3, this is the hardest phase. And it's not for the reason you think. It's not harder because the body fights back more, although it definitely does. It's harder because of what happens in your head. And this is the battle that I go through every single year when I prepare for my competitions. The hunger, the fridge looking at you and inviting you in. But at 16% body fat, Craig looked genuinely good, better than he had done in years. And his friends were commenting that he was, asking what he was doing and how they can do it too. But that's when the dangerous thought creeps in. Maybe this is good enough. Maybe this is enough for now. And when you've been dieting for 6 months, you're genuinely tired. Not necessarily physically, although you can be, but mentally. The constant calorie awareness, the discipline, the logging, and he didn't break. And honestly, that feeling is super legit. Like 6 months of discipline is not easy. I'm not going to tell you that it is either. But here's what I told Craig. 5 years from now, you won't remember how long this took. You won't remember that it was hard. What you will remember, what will still feel real, is whether you finished or whether you stopped 7 pounds short of the thing that you set out to do. The men that I've coached who regret their journey, almost all of them quit in phase 3, not phase 1 or phase 2, but phase 3, when they were already this close, when the finish line was right there. The regret is heavier than any diet. And there's a tactical reason why phase 3 is also harder as well. As you do get leaner, your body has less fat to give. The deficit that worked at 24% doesn't produce the same results at 16%. Your body has adapted, which is why the plan has to as well. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the unconscious movement that you do throughout the day, it just drops as you get leaner. Your body is trying to conserve energy. You want to sit down more. You don't want to take the steps. You park closer at the supermarket, whether you want to or not. So the solution at this phase is twofold. Firstly, we protect muscle by keeping the protein high. Actually, that helps with satiation a little bit as well, so you can taper up protein a little bit. At this point, Craig was hitting over 190 to 200 grams of protein per day. Secondly, keeping the deficit a little bit more modest. Actually, you can slow that deficit down a little bit because the reality is it's easier to lose muscle in this phase as well. So instead of slashing calories more and more and more, we'd actually rely on movement a little bit to close the gap so we can focus on keeping your food in a sane place. So we moved steps to 12,000 per day and we kept calories around 1,900. And it was slow. Some weeks you lose half a pound, some weeks less than half a pound. But you keep it moving. And then 12 weeks later, Craig hit 177 pounds, his first ever fully visible set of abs at over the age of 40. So how long did it actually take? Well, phase 1 was 11 weeks, phase 2 was 14 weeks, and phase 3 was 12 weeks. That's 37 weeks. Nearly 9 months instead of 7. The math was right from day one. The math is always right. So when you listen to these guys and girls on YouTube and they give you this amazing spiel about it's actually just going to take this long, yeah, it will, but that's not real life because you're not a spreadsheet and life happens. Hormones respond, momentum gets lost, and it has to be rebuilt. But here's what I really want you to take from this. The guys who reach 12% are not the guys with the perfect plan. With the guys who kept going when the plan stopped feeling exciting, who fixed problems instead of abandoning the process, who held on to their identity as someone who sees things through, even when it was slow, even maybe when it stopped, even when it's hard, even when they could have had a very reasonable excuse to stop. That identity is the thing. Everything else is just tactics, the diets, the way to eat, all that kind of stuff is just tactics. And if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in any part of this story, the false starts, the restrict and binge cycle, the almost getting there and then quitting, that's the type of person that I work with. I coach men who are done with the cycle of starting over. We build the plan, we build the system, and I'm there in the moments that matter. The work dinner, the vacation, the hard week at work, the week when the scale doesn't move so much, to keep you from making the mistakes that cost you months in the end. Details for my one-to-one coaching are pinned in the top comment. If you're ready to come and have a conversation, an honest one, just hit that link and we can have that conversation. I'll leave this video here and I'll thank you for the next one. Comment, subscribe, and I'll see you very soon.